Welcome everyone. I'm Sheriff Joe Lombardo and we're going to have a discussion about the state of the department.
Take a security point.
First, I have to apologize to everyone. Usually we do the state of the department at the Smith Center, and whoever's available or desire to come see me in person, we like to accommodate that. But this year, COVID, everybody's aware of the situation. So I think it's important for me still to address the workforce and you to hear directly from me on the state of the department and where we're going into the future. You know, the purpose of the state of the department is discuss the highlights of the previous year and where department's going into the future. So there's a couple things I want to talk about today. That is the strategic plan, our response to COVID, our current situation with COVID, the budget, use of force, and what we're doing as far as violent crime. Let's talk about the strategic plan. It's very important in my mind, and it should be in your mind too, on why we have the strategic plan and how we function as a department based on the strategic plan. So if you've heard me in the last 6 years as your sheriff, one of the most important things I want you to do is affect change. Produce change, adapt to change, and provide change. The environment we work in is changing. Society changes, the societal norms change, and what people accept and don't accept, and the laws change. So we have to adjust accordingly. If we did what we did 30 years ago, or 32 years ago when I was hired, we are not going to be able to do in today's age. So we have to adjust with it. The strategic plans identifies those particular issues and help you affect that change.
I'm Assistant Sheriff Christopher Darcy, and I'm here to talk to you today about the strategic plan. The strategic plan really is a blueprint for how we move into the future. It helps us get there. So as we move forward and we deal with a significant amount of issues that come before this organization, we can always reflect upon the strategic plan to keep us focused on what we need to do. It's a constant reminder. When we look at the goals, it's how can we support these goals with the actions that we're doing out there every day within our community. And in the process of strategic planning, a variety of people on the agency participate in identifying the tactics and strategies which we will employ to reduce crime moving into the future. The strategic planning process is so important for every organization in the Valley, but specifically for the Metropolitan Police Department, because we are faced with numerous challenges that involve the community as well as our own organization, and we all have to work together to ensure that we meet these challenges. The strategic plan should mean something to every single officer and employee within this organization. Whether you're commissioned or a civilian, you are part of the process by which we are able to improve this agency through that planning process. And we value your feedback, and we also value that you use it every single day in what you're doing, so that way we can stay on point and focus so that we can achieve the vision.
So the biggie, COVID. I've had to make adjustments, and more importantly, the people on the street had to make adjustments. You know, how they communicate with an individual they encounter. They don't know what this person's been involved in. They don't know if they're positive for COVID. They don't know their background. And all the extra responsibilities and duties that you have to do on a daily basis that you're not used to doing. And I think we've done a fantastic job individually and as an organization in adjusting to that environment. And I think we're probably getting pandemic tired at this point, just like the rest of society, and they're hoping it's going to eventually subside or go away. You know, your protective gear and how you wash your hands on a regular basis, and you know, you could take advantage of it and not get close to people you never wanted to talk to before anyway. Or you're not comfortable shaking people's hands anymore, so you have to figure out different ways to meet and greet people and communicate. Now the vaccines come on board, and people are in a quandary whether they should get it or is it mandatory? Is the sheriff going to make it mandatory? I made a decision not. I think it falls under the collective bargaining issue. If we make it mandatory, I didn't want to have to go that direction. But I personally absolutely advise you to get the vaccine to benefit you and your family members and everybody you deal with on a daily basis. I would really like people to evaluate the need for the vaccine and come on board and do what's right in your own mind and go and get the vaccine. I had it myself, no issues, no symptoms. Some people have experienced some slight symptoms like allergic reactions, but all in all, I believe it to be safe, and the science is there. So with all that being said, it's still very important for our employees to abide by the CDC guidelines until everybody in society gets this figured out. It's important for people to stay diligent and pay attention to all the guidelines that are provided by the folks that know more than we do.
This is something that I never thought that I would see in my entire career. And let's face it, we were stepping into the unknown. None of us have ever dealt with this. I'm Kelly McMahill, and I'm the Deputy Chief of the Professional Standards Division. And today I'm going to be talking to you about this last year we had in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. In those early days, we had to come up initially with a testing protocol. We had to come up with protocols of how to report that you had symptoms of COVID. I really have to credit health and safety. They went above and beyond, and today continue to be a 7-day operation where they're continually taking phone calls from our employees. The biggest challenge with something like this with the pandemic is that, honestly, there's not a single thing on this agency it didn't touch. It really was just across the board something that every one of us had to learn to understand and live with. And what kept us awake at night was that we were going to deplete our workforce. That really, I think, over this last year is the thing that worried me the most, is that we just weren't going to have enough of a workforce to continue to provide the service to the community that they deserved, but also keep one another safe out there. As executive staff, we talked about what our mission was going to be and what our goals were going to be. And number one was the health and wellness of our employees. And we knew that if our employees were worried about their families, if they were worried about bringing something home to their families, they weren't going to show up. We really had still a remarkable year in regards to crime fighting, while also dealing with a pandemic. And it just goes to show that we really hire the best of the human race here at LVMPD. I absolutely believe that. We were resilient in the face of something that we never expected and was completely foreign to us, and that's why I love being here. That's why I love wearing this uniform. I have to really give credit to our civilians that we're told, you work at a first responder agency, and so if we're working, the men and women in uniform, we need you here. We can't do it without you. And without missing a beat, they continue to show up. For the month and a half, 2 months that we had to send our volunteers home, I missed them too. I know we all did, right? It's a strange feeling to walk around and not see anyone in a yellow shirt. And so in order to keep them safe, we sent them home. But the day they came back, I was pretty happy to see them all here in the building. As we move into the next phase of this pandemic, which is the vaccine is available, I urge you all to get the vaccine. Please, in order to protect your families, to protect yourself, we do strongly encourage you to get the vaccine. And I also strongly encourage you to take care of one another. Find the bright spots where you can. It's not always easy. And try to have fun where you can. I know that it's been a long year, and I just want to thank every one of the folks that work here. I think we came through this stronger than we've ever been.
So the other piece I want to talk about is the budget, because it's very important for people to understand our current situation and what we anticipate is going to happen into the future. It's no secret. We're going through some budget constraints, some budget hard times. And people see that in society. People are out of work, businesses are closed, associated with the COVID, and in understanding of the budget, 30% of it comes through the consolidated tax through the city and the county, 30% through property tax, and 30% say through sales tax, and 10% is self-generating. We receive a finite amount of money from property taxes, and unless property taxes increase, that finite money is finite. Sales tax has a big swing, and that's where we're affected the most. And that's where we hired the majority of our police officers on the police department through the sales tax. And that sales tax is not coming in because tourism aren't here. So what's on the back of my employees' minds? Am I going to get laid off? Am I going to have a job tomorrow? That's the last thing I want you to worry about, especially when you're approaching a car in the middle of the night and don't know who's in the car. I want you paying attention who's in that car versus whether you're going to have a job tomorrow. Hopefully I don't eat my words on this, but I don't anticipate any pay cuts, and I don't anticipate any additional layoffs. We're relying greatly on the federal stimulus that we anticipate is going to come on board, but the tax numbers are actually better than we predicted at this point. And so I believe on the budget issues and what we deal with on a daily basis and what you have to be concerned with as an employee within the organization, there is some sunshine associated with that.
My name is Rich Hogan. I'm the Chief Financial Officer here at LVMPD. I'm responsible for the enforcement side of Metro's budget. The county is responsible for the detention side of Metro's budget. When the COVID mitigation efforts first went into place, the projections we had at the time were dire, were very, very dire. We made a very conscious decision to plan for every contingency, but react to what we actually knew. One of the strategies we had going into it also was that our emphasis was going to be on preserving police officer and corrections officer positions. And why is that? We've gone to the voters for property tax initiatives, sales tax initiatives, all of which we're putting an additional burden on the taxpayer. So to that end, there were a few functions that we eliminated as positions became vacant, as other positions became vacant on the civilian side. We didn't fill them. As various rank and detective positions, which cost us a little bit more than a standard police officer position, we became vacant. Many of those were not filled. Instead, they were the positions were put back to patrol. The combination of all those, along with our overtime reductions, I think has positioned us pretty well going into next fiscal year. So the initial fear that we had, which was that in fiscal year 20, in our upcoming fiscal year, that we would be out of essentially our savings and more cops or fund balance, and out of our Savings and Crime Prevention Act, would have created the perfect storm. But it looks like we've dodged the worst of the bullet, if you will. The challenges we have on the detention side are a little bit more significant. We don't have any dedicated funding to the detention side. It's just strictly the county contribution. We've cut where we could, but it's going to be a little bit more of a difficult challenge for us in next fiscal year. We don't anticipate further cuts. We don't anticipate layoffs. We don't anticipate requesting cuts to salaries. We are where we need to be, assuming, of course, that nothing else happens that we can't foresee. I've been amazed at how sensitive most everybody is to our plight, and have really taken it to heart and trying to help in any way that they can. And all of it matters. We are going to get through this. Actually, I am optimistic, actually, and really the vaccine is what has created that optimism. I mean, there's light at the end of the tunnel that we're likely to experience by a return to some semblance of normality from the vaccine's effects.
So let's talk about police reform on the heels of George Floyd. But you know what? I don't want to say on the heels of George Floyd. Let's move back a couple years, and when we got audited by the Department of Justice in reference to our OISs, we saw the writing on the wall. We said, hey, we had to make some adjustments. De-escalation was the key component of our training associated with that, and all the abilities to communicate, verbal judo, everything that goes along with those dynamic situations and dealing with the people with mental distress and the homeless and everything else that's made their way into the police environment. We made adjustments, and I'm very proud of that. And we policized all those things that go along with use of force and dynamic use of force. We brought forward way before George Floyd. Move forward, George Floyd, all the eyes on law enforcement associated with that, and the need for reform across the board, perceived need for reform across the board associated with that event. Okay, I embraced it. I said what the officers did associated with George Floyd was improper, it was unprofessional, and it didn't need to happen. But we have to be aware it did happen, and we have to be aware of what society perceives of law enforcement today. So I took it upon myself to say, I got your back, I'm going to protect you. The local politicians here in Las Vegas, I'm very proud of the county commission and the city council saying, yeah, we're going to support you. And a direct result of that is we had a decrease in crime. as compared to the other jurisdictions that you're seeing the politicians opining on, the systemic racism and the unprofessional and the out of control police departments. The police officers says, no, if you're not going to support us, we're not going to support you. And I'm very proud of our police department and the fact they say, this is what I signed up for, this is what I raised my right hand to do, and I'm going to do it as long as the administration supports me. In my opinion, I believe my staff and myself is in full support of what we do on a daily basis, and the proof is in the pudding. We've reduced crime associated with 2020, where every other jurisdiction in the United States didn't, and I'm very proud of that.
Hello, I'm Captain Jim LaRochelle from the Office of the Sheriff. I'm here today to talk to you about police reform, policy, and the outcomes from the riots that occurred this summer. The protests were something that we had never seen before. Initially, we tried to catch up to the amount of people that were protesting. We were surprised at the amount of angst that was directed towards our officers out in the street. Our agency had done a number of things to promote reform throughout our history, and we had done a number of good things that were recognized as best police practices. And here we were during the midst of the protests that we were painted in the same broad brushstrokes as many agencies across the country. So we had to go back and look at our plans on how they related to those previous incidents and adjust them. And these protests, we were taking not only the initial outcry, but that transformed as the night went on into being on the receiving end of bad things, or rocks and bottles, things thrown at us that turned into skirmishes on those protest lines between the protesters and the police, really turning into a riot situation. We had to respond to those. I think our agency did a tremendous job. We showed restraint. That said, we did have officers hurt, and that was part of what we wanted to go back and fix too, is be able to ensure that we're responding in a way that's keeping our employees safe also, but also keeping in mind the community, and also protecting the rights of the people that were there to make their voice known in a way that's peaceful and it adheres to the Constitution. So police reform is really about trying to meet public's expectations. And certainly anybody that's been in policing for a generation has seen the public's expectations change over time. The thought today is that I'm better today than I was yesterday, and I want to be better tomorrow. And the same thing is with policing. When we talk about reform, certainly today we use less use of force than we did a generation ago, and that's a good thing. And the idea is not to eliminate use of force in all circumstances. The idea is to make good decisions on when and how you use force, to make sure that when you use force, it's necessary. We're not talking about handcuffing the officers out in the street to do their job. Many times we're talking about, here's a way to do the job better. Here's a way to move through your career and to follow these guidelines, these expectations, where you can have a healthy career not impacted by something negatively. We have initiated some of the very best reforms internally by ourselves from the start when we talk about duty to intervene and sanctity of life and a foot pursuit policy. Those are things that LVMPD was a premier agency, one of the very first agencies to incorporate, and you're seeing other agencies do the same thing. I do think that this year that police reform will again be a topic at the state legislative session. But having said that, I think that LVPD is in a good position, that we have set a high standard, that we have the best practices, we have the best policies and the best training. I am not nervous about what will be enacted at the legislative and how much it will affect the way that we do business. Without a doubt, 100% certain that our officers are some of the best trained officers in the country. We have some of the best sound policies in the country that are well thought out, that provide clear direction and good guidance. And likewise is that we do hold ourselves accountable. We do have good oversight of our agency. And so for us, I think it's business as usual. But having said that, we'll continue to look around and incorporate new ideas. And that goes back to, again, too, is that we're always looking to change, to get better, to be better than yesterday, and to improve upon what we're doing. So we don't get into that situation where others are forcing us to make the change.
So let's talk about mental health and homelessness. Unfortunately, it's a key issue. It's quite often a response required associated with those two particular societal ills. When a community member is dealing with a person in mental distress, or a homeless person camped out in front of their place of business or residence, or wherever they may frequent on a daily basis, the answer to them is dial 911. So it's not something that's going to go away, and it's not something that we can ignore. So it's important for people to realize that, and that we responded to it in the appropriate manner. And we realize that going forward as an administration and as an organization, and develop tools, or give the police officers in the response to these particular issue tools to address it.
I'm Deputy Chief John McGrath of the Tourist Safety Division. I'm here to talk about homelessness and mental health going forward into 2021. We started the Homeless Outreach Team in 2018, and since we started that team, we've contacted over 20,000 people. The homeless and the mentally ill need help, and we are in the best position to be the first people to contact them and to try to get them help. Starting in 2020, we started to form the Behavioral Health Unit. As part of that Behavioral Health Unit going forward, we have 6 interns from UNLV. They're graduate students in social work, and each of them are case managers for some of the what we call clients that we're trying to get more services to. And as we go in 2021, we really expect that unit to have more and more results. We moved a crisis intervention team out of training and put them in community engagement. And so that section now includes crisis intervention, the homeless outreach team, and LEMA. LEMA stands for Law Enforcement Mental Health Addiction. We want to let this Las Vegas community know that we care about the issue of homelessness, but we also understand that people that are mentally ill need help, whether it's from us or us referring them to a service, or while they're at jail, before they get out of jail at CCDC, whether we can get them into a program where they'll be getting assistance and not getting arrested for crimes that they commit. And the jail does an awesome job of recognizing the problem we have at the detention center, and as they get out, what they call a dismissal program, trying to get them assistance as they go forward. You can't just give up, you have to keep trying. Every time you contact someone, it's an opportunity to get them off the street. So we ask our officers to contact as many homeless as we can, to make sure that maybe that's the day where they're going to say yes to getting services. So the outreach, the referrals to the services, we're going to keep trying. We're not going to quit. We're going to do it better in 2021.
Well, always an important piece, and ever since I've been your sheriff, my priorities have been violent crime. And last year we included quality of life, and I think we're going to continue in that vein. You know what, I don't think we are going to continue in that vein. A lot of people don't understand 30% of our tourism volume is repeat customers. And if there's a perception in Las Vegas that Las Vegas is not safe, we will not succeed as a police department. And when I mean succeed is dealing with violent crime associated with a depressed economy and the ability to keep the workforce robust and at the numbers that we need to do to be successful.
I'm Ray Spencer. I'm the lieutenant of the homicide section, and I'm here to talk about violent crime and homicides. 2020 was a very busy year. As an investigator, it's a difficult year because what other year has it been acceptable to walk around with a mask on? There's no question, from the sheriff to all the leadership on this department, that we have geared our focus towards reducing violent crime. We're the gold standard nationally when you look at solvability rate. It's at 94%, and when you look at the national average, that's 60%. There's no other major city law enforcement anywhere in the United States that's close to what we've done. And I think that that is a true testament to the 24 detectives, the 2 investigative specialists, and the 4 sergeants that work in homicide when you look at homicide specifically. But most importantly, you know, we can't get away from the fact that the officers that are out on the street have done a tremendous job, because we would not be anywhere near the success rate that we have right now if it wasn't for the patrol officers that are out making those stops and being proactive and doing the great work that they're doing. If the community doesn't trust the police department, they're not going to provide the tips that we receive. And because the trust that we've built, we're getting a lot of those tips that I don't think a lot of agencies are getting. Also, our solvability percentage is so high that the community has confidence that when they report a crime and they cooperate with the police, that we're going to solve that crime. And that's not just homicide, that's robbery, that's burglary, that's every crime that we investigate on this agency. As an agency and as a community, we need to be very proud of that. Our assistance that we're getting from our digital forensics lab out with the advancements in technology are helping us identify people quicker, solve crimes quicker. Things that would not have been solved 10 years ago are getting solved routinely in 2020 and going into 2021. The importance of making an impact on shooting crimes is paramount. And when you look at every 415A that we investigate could potentially be a homicide that we're investigating. And when you look at the impact that homicides and violent crime have, everything that we can do to reduce those numbers, we need to make sure that we're doing. That is where the work that the patrol officers are doing on the street, I can tell you just from looking at some of the involvement and cooperation and hard work that they are doing, that's who we need to be looking at as the success of this agency.
All right, so we made it through 2020. So, you know, the proverbial middle finger, we're going to give that to 2020. And you know what, let's look for the light at the end of the tunnel, folks. We had a very tough, trying year in 2020. I anticipate 2021 is going to be more positive. You know, with the onset of the vaccine, people coming back to Las Vegas to bolster the economy, and you know, all the things that goes along with the robust economy and a quality of life, community, and society having a better perspective on their daily lives, both with our family members, with internally in our family, and the community that we deal with on a daily basis, and that we are required to serve and that we're proud to serve. I want everybody to hold their chin up high, be proud of how we responded to 2020, and look forward to 2021 being a very successful, positive, forward-moving year. Thank you, everyone.